The fire is supposed to destroy what is hiding in the grass. In Florida, it can do something much more disturbing. It can make the hidden visible. When prescribed flames move across the Everglades, the green wall of sawgrass disappears, the ground turns black, and suddenly an ecosystem that normally hides almost everything becomes exposed. That matters because somewhere inside this enormous marsh is one of the most difficult invasive predators on Earth to find. Burmese pythons can be nearly impossible to detect, even when they are right in front of trained searchers. They blend into vegetation, move through water, remain motionless for long periods, and occupy thousands of square kilometers of habitat. Scientists have spent years trying to measure how many are actually there, where they are moving, and how badly they are affecting native wildlife. Now they are combining prescribed fire with environmental DNA, radio tracking, detector dogs, scout snakes, statistical models, and organized removal. The goal is not simply to kill snakes, it is to expose a hidden population before the snakes disappear back into the grass. And the deeper scientists look, the more complicated the problem becomes. Because the fire is not revealing a single giant infestation. It is revealing just how difficult it is to know what is happening inside a landscape where the predator has learned how to disappear. Before anyone can understand why fire matters, it helps to understand what makes the Burmese python such a difficult animal to fight. This species is native to South and Southeast Asia, but established populations now occupy southern Florida after captive animals were released or escaped. The National Park Service describes Burmese pythons as secretive, well camouflaged, difficult to detect, and capable of eating a wide variety of mammals, birds, and reptiles. They are now established across much of Everglades National Park and are considered one of the most serious invasive threats in the ecosystem. Their effect is not simply theoretical. Research has documented dramatic reductions in several native mammal populations in areas where pythons are established, and agencies identify python control as a major conservation priority. In other words, the snake is not frightening because it is large. It is frightening because it is large, adaptable, hard to detect, and perfectly capable of exploiting an ecosystem that never evolved with this predator in it. That last part is critical because the Everglades is almost perfectly designed to hide a snake. The landscape is huge. Much of it is shallow wetland, sawgrass prairie, mangrove, marsh, or inaccessible terrain. A person walking through it can see only a small fraction of what is around them. A python lying motionless beneath vegetation may be only a few meters away and still remain invisible. U.S. Geological Survey researchers have actually measured how difficult these animals are to detect. One study estimated detection probabilities during visual searches ranging from 0.01 to 0.46, depending on how the data and search effort were modeled. That means a survey can be conducted carefully and still have a very low chance of detecting a python that is genuinely present. This is one of the reasons population estimates are so difficult. Counting the snakes you see is not the same as counting the snakes that exist. That distinction changes the entire battle. Imagine searching a football stadium for 10 people who are trying not to be seen. Finding 3 does not mean only 3 are there. The Everglades is vastly harder. The field is not flat, the targets can move, the targets can hide, and there is no reliable way to search every patch of vegetation. If researchers remove every python they encounter, they also change the population being monitored. The search itself affects the data. Scientists, therefore, need ways to estimate what they cannot see. This is why Burmese python research has become as much a problem of detection science as a problem of wildlife removal. A fire that reduces vegetation, a water sample that contains python DNA, a transmitter inside a tracked animal, or a trained dog following scent can all provide pieces of evidence that a simple visual count cannot. And this is where prescribed fire enters the story. Fire has always been part of the ecology of South Florida. The Everglades evolved with periodic burning, including lightning-driven fires and other natural disturbances that helped maintain open marsh habitats. Land managers have also used prescribed burning to control vegetation, recycle nutrients, maintain habitat structure, and prevent woody plants from taking over areas that depend on fire. So when people see flames crossing the Everglades today, it is important not to assume that every fire is an emergency. A carefully planned prescribed burn is a land management operation. The surprising part is that the same process that restores habitat can also make an invasive predator easier to find. Burning removes dead vegetation and accumulated thatch. Once the tall cover is gone, the visual landscape becomes much simpler. A snake that would vanish into green vegetation has fewer places to hide in the immediate aftermath. That does not make fire a python eradication tool. It makes it a potential way to change the detection environment. That distinction matters because some of the most dramatic claims about fire and pythons go further than the evidence supports. A prescribed burn does not guarantee a spectacular mass emergence of hundreds of snakes. There is no reliable rule saying that every burn turns the ground into a moving carpet of pythons. The more defensible conclusion is narrower. When vegetation is reduced, searchers may have a better chance of spotting animals crossing open ground, moving along burn edges, or seeking new cover. Fire changes the background against which the snake is trying to remain hidden. In wildlife research, that can be enormously important. An animal with an extremely low detection probability does not need to become easy to find. Even a modest improvement in visibility can increase the number of useful encounters, and that is the real potential of fire. It creates a temporary window in which the snake's camouflage is less effective. The reason this matters so much is the damage pythons can cause once they become established. Burmese pythons are generalist predators. They do not depend on one species of prey. They can consume birds, mammals, reptiles, and other animals. The result is pressure across the food web rather than a single isolated prey decline. USGS and National Park Service material describes serious effects on native wildlife, and multiple studies have documented sharp reductions in mammal abundance in areas with established python populations. Some of the most striking declines involve mammals such as raccoons, opossums, and marsh rabbits. But scientists are careful about how these figures are interpreted. Not every species has disappeared everywhere, and not every ecological change in South Florida can be blamed on pythons. Still, the evidence is strong enough that established Burmese pythons are considered a major threat to native wildlife in the greater Everglades ecosystem. This creates an ugly feedback loop. Pythons become established. Native prey becomes harder to find. Managers need more effort to locate the snakes. But as the prey disappears, the ecosystem itself changes. A landscape with fewer mammals is harder to monitor because the signs of animal activity become less obvious. A predator that remains hidden while prey disappears creates an illusion of emptiness. The landscape may still be biologically active, but the evidence humans use to understand it becomes harder to read. That is one reason fire can be useful. It does not just expose snakes. It exposes the physical structure of the habitat and can make animal movement easier to observe. The blackened ground can reveal tracks, movement paths, and open areas that were previously hidden by dense vegetation. The story of the invasion itself also matters. Burmese pythons did not arrive in Florida through some mysterious natural expansion across the Gulf of Mexico. The National Park Service identifies accidental and intentional releases of captive animals as the source of the established population. The exotic pet trade created the pathway. Storm damage may also have contributed to releases, particularly after Hurricane Andrew in 1992, but scientists do not reduce the invasion to one hurricane. It developed over decades through multiple escaped or released animals and subsequent reproduction. This distinction matters because it shows how quickly a human-created ecological problem can become independent of the humans who caused it. The original pet may have been tiny. The ecosystem it entered was enormous. The consequences were not. And once the snakes began reproducing, the problem became much harder to reverse. There was no easy geographic barrier between the invasive population and the surrounding wetland system. The Everglades is a connected mosaic of water, land, canals, levees, marshes, and forested islands. Pythons can move through much of it. Some areas are accessible only by specialized vehicles or boats. Others are nearly impossible to search safely. That is why Florida has invested in multiple methods rather than one single removal technology. Hunters search levees and roads. Trained professionals operate in difficult habitats. Detector dogs can locate scent. Scout snakes can help identify other pythons. eDNA can identify genetic traces in water. Radiotelemetry can reveal how captured animals move. And prescribed fire can change the physical environment in which all of those searches occur. Environmental DNA may be one of the most important pieces of that puzzle because it changes the question completely. Instead of asking whether someone can physically see a snake, scientists can collect water and test it for traces of genetic material. Animals shed cells into their environment through skin, mucus, waste, and other biological material. USGS researchers have developed python-specific eDNA markers for water samples from South Florida. The technique can help identify locations where pythons are present even when visual searches fail. It can also help researchers investigate waterways that may function as movement corridors. That is especially useful because invasive species often spread through connected habitats before humans realize exactly how far they have moved. eDNA does not tell managers exactly where a snake is standing, but it can tell them that the landscape has recently contained evidence of one. That sounds almost futuristic, but the principle is simple. The python leaves a molecular footprint. Water collects the footprint. Scientists read it. In a sense, the snake can remain invisible while still giving away its presence. This is especially important in the northern Greater Everglades, where managers want to detect expansion before established populations become difficult to control. If eDNA can identify a population front early enough, people can concentrate expensive searches on the right locations. The technology, therefore, works best as an early warning system rather than a replacement for trapping or removal. It tells scientists where attention may be needed. Human teams then have to determine what is actually there. Scout snakes offer another strange but scientifically grounded approach. Researchers can capture a Burmese python and implant or attach a tracking device, then release the animal and monitor its location. During periods of increased movement or breeding activity, the tracked snake can potentially lead researchers toward other snakes. The idea is to exploit the biology of the invasive species itself. USGS projects in Florida have used instrumented pythons together with detector dogs and radio telemetry to improve detection of other animals. The method is not a magical snake compass. It simply provides information about where a known animal moves and when its behavior may indicate opportunities to find additional snakes. Dogs attack the same problem through smell. Humans rely heavily on sight, but pythons are built to defeat that sense. A trained dog can investigate chemical traces we cannot perceive. In areas where endangered native species need protection, detector dogs can search for pythons or help identify likely locations. Again, the pattern is becoming clear. No single method is good enough. The Everglades has forced scientists to combine incomplete tools. Fire gives better visibility. Dogs provide scent information. eDNA provides genetic evidence. Scout snakes provide movement information. Telemetry reveals behavior. Statistical models convert all of those observations into estimates of what cannot be directly counted. And then there are humans, walking the levees, driving the roads, searching canal edges, and entering the wetlands. Florida's Python Challenge has turned removal into a large public participation program with formal training and rules. In 2026, the National Park Service again participated in the statewide competition, allowing trained participants to search designated areas and remove Burmese pythons according to specific regulations. Firearms are prohibited during the competition inside the park, and participants have to follow rules concerning identification, safety, and humane euthanasia. The important point is that these events are not presented as a complete eradication strategy. They increase search effort and engage people in a problem where simply putting more eyes on the ground can still be useful. But there is an uncomfortable reality underneath all of this. A large removal number does not automatically mean the population is collapsing. If detection is extremely low, thousands of snakes may remain unseen. Scientists have to account for that mathematically. The USGS detection research is a reminder that even repeated surveys can miss most animals present. This is why population estimates in the Everglades are necessarily uncertain. Instead of one exact number, researchers work with ranges, models, and confidence intervals. The public wants to know whether there are 10,000 snakes or 100,000. Science often cannot provide a single reliable figure. The more honest answer is that a large, established population exists across thousands of square kilometers and is difficult to measure directly. That is also why some flashy solutions fail. Consider attractive research. Scientists know that reproductive female pythons can attract males under controlled conditions. It seems logical to build a trap around that behavior. But in May 2026, USGS researchers published the results of a field experiment testing captive reproductive females as lures for wild males. They used camera traps and collected more than 3 million photographs. After filtering the images with AI, they found only 4 independent python detections across 12 sites during 90 days. 3 detections occurred near female pythons, and 1 occurred at a control site. The result was clear. The lure did not produce a meaningful improvement in wild python detection. A strategy that sounds irresistible in a laboratory may be almost useless in the real Everglades. That result is important because it tells us something about this invasion. The snake's behavior is not simple enough to exploit with one perfect trick. Field conditions change, temperature changes, water levels change, mating behavior changes. The snake may not encounter the lure may not remain effective. A population spread across thousands of square kilometers behaves differently from a controlled animal in a pen. The Everglades is not a laboratory. It is a living system with weather, water, vegetation, predators, prey, and countless hidden variables. This is where prescribed burning becomes more interesting. Fire is not a chemical lure, a genetically engineered organism, or a trap. It is a landscape-level intervention. It changes visibility. It changes cover. It changes where an animal can comfortably rest. And because the habitat itself is part of the problem, altering the habitat can alter the search. But prescribed fire must be handled carefully. Managers choose burn windows based on weather, fuel conditions, moisture, smoke movement, and safety. A fire that burns too intensely can damage the very ecosystem managers are trying to protect. A fire that fails to carry can leave too much vegetation untouched. Smoke can affect roads, communities, and nearby wildlife. Water levels can change the behavior of the fire. South Florida conditions are not stable enough for simple formulas. Land managers have to make decisions based on changing conditions in real time. The broader ecological purpose also remains essential. Fire in the Everglades is not solely about pythons. It can help maintain sawgrass prairie, prevent woody vegetation from changing open marsh habitats, and support the natural fire regime of the ecosystem. In some areas, a prescribed burn may therefore be beneficial, even if no python is ever seen afterward. That is an important distinction. Python management can be integrated into fire management, but the burn itself is part of a larger ecological program. The most interesting question is what happens after the flames disappear. The first change is visual. The landscape opens. Black ground replaces dense vegetation. Searchers can see farther. Snakes moving between cover patches become easier to detect. But the advantage does not last forever. Everglades vegetation grows back. New shoots emerge. The landscape becomes green again. The snake's camouflage returns. That means a burn creates a temporary detection window, not a permanent solution. And temporary windows can still be valuable. Imagine trying to find a single needle in a giant field of hay. Burning part of the hay does not eliminate every needle. But if it exposes one in an area where you have been searching blindly, suddenly the odds change. That's essentially what fire can do. It reduces the visual noise. The same idea can help explain why python removal often focuses on roads, levees, and canals. These are not necessarily the places where pythons prefer to live. They are places humans can search. Wildlife management often depends on the difference between habitat availability and searchability. A snake can occupy a giant marsh, but hunters may be limited to its edges. If fire or water movement temporarily funnels snakes toward accessible margins, managers may gain information they could never obtain by searching the interior alone. Still, scientists are not declaring victory. The National Park Service continues to describe Burmese pythons as extremely difficult and expensive to remove once established. They occupy a huge area, and the population cannot be reliably estimated simply by counting captured animals. The current strategy is persistent pressure, improved detection, and protection of vulnerable native wildlife. The agencies are effectively accepting that complete control may take years or may remain impossible in the deepest parts of the ecosystem. The realistic objective is to keep the invasion from causing even more damage and prevent expansion into new areas whenever possible. There's also a larger lesson in what happened here. Florida did not create an ecological crisis because someone intentionally designed an invasive superpredator. The crisis emerged because an animal that seemed manageable in captivity was introduced into an environment where its ecological constraints were almost non-existent. The python did not have to become smarter. It simply had to survive. Florida provided warmth, water, abundant prey, and a huge landscape. Natural selection did the rest. Now humans are trying to reverse the process. The tools are strange because the problem is strange. We release scout snakes to find snakes. We collect water to read snake DNA. We train dogs to smell hidden snakes. We use statistical models to estimate animals that nobody saw. And sometimes we deliberately burn a habitat so that an animal that evolved to disappear becomes visible for a few days. That is not science fiction. It is modern invasive species management, and none of it works alone. The fire cannot identify the snake. The dog cannot estimate the population. The DNA test cannot capture the animal. The tracker cannot cover the whole Everglades. The hunter cannot search every acre. The model cannot create data where none exists. The solution has to be layered. That may be the most important thing the python invasion has taught scientists. In a landscape this large, control is not one heroic action. It has thousands of small advantages. A better survey here, a new eDNA marker there, a tracked snake moving into a new area, a dog identifying a scent, a burn opening a hidden corridor, a hunter seeing a python that would otherwise have vanished. Each individual detection is small. Together they produce a picture, and that picture is still incomplete. Because there is one fact that remains unchanged. For every snake humans see, there may be others they do not. That uncertainty is what makes the Everglades invasion so difficult and so compelling. It is not a war where the enemy stands on a visible battlefield. The battlefield itself is alive, constantly changing and full of hiding places. When fire moves across the sawgrass, the landscape temporarily loses some of its camouflage. For a moment, the hidden becomes visible. Then the green returns. The cover grows back, the snake disappears, and the search begins again. That is why the title of this story should not really be Florida Burned the Everglades and Found Hundreds of Snakes. That makes the science sound simpler than it is. The real story is more unsettling. Florida burned sections of a naturally fire-adapted ecosystem, and the change in vegetation created an opportunity to observe a predator that normally hides exceptionally well. Scientists are using that opportunity alongside a growing network of technologies designed to detect what the eye misses, and the biggest discovery may not be a snake at all. It may be how little we still know about what is happening beneath the grass. The Everglades is enormous. The pythons are difficult to detect. The native wildlife has already suffered. And the tools used to fight the invasion are improving, but none of them can see everything. So when the fire burns across the marsh and the smoke turns the sky gray, the most important question is not how many snakes crawl out. It is what the cleared landscape allows scientists to measure that they could not measure before. A track, a movement, an open corridor, a hiding place, a python, a clue. Fire gives them a brief look into a world that normally stays hidden. Then the vegetation returns. And somewhere inside it, another Burmese python is waiting. The battle for the Everglades will not be decided by one burn, one hunter, one competition, or one new piece of technology. It will be decided by whether scientists can keep improving detection faster than the snakes can disappear, reproduce, and spread. That is the real fight. Not fire against python, visibility against invisibility. And for now, every time the flames clear the grass, Florida gets another short glimpse of what has been hiding there all along.